Today we're making butternut squash and pear soup without a pot. I figured that cluttering the internet with yet another butternut squash soup is silly, unless it adds some value. And what better value is there than washing fewer pots and pans? Let's preheat the oven to 400 degrees and get started. Let's trim the ends of our squash. Stand it up, cut in half, and scoop out the seeds. The trick to peeling squash is to start at the very top of the straight part to get the skin easily caught in the peeler. If you try to get started in any other spot, the peeler has a hard time piercing the skin. Then turn the squash around and peel the more problematic rounded part. Again, remember to start where you trimmed the ends, not in the middle of the skin. This is a long squash, so we'll cut it in half and then cut it into wedges. This gives me a skinny edge that becomes extra brown. You probably heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. Browning equals yum. I should make that the slogan of this channel. We'll also peel and core 2 bosc pears. One of the pears will get roasted with the squash and pureed into the soup, and the other pear will be used for garnish. Unfortunately, my pears weren't very ripe and tasted a bit grainy. Apples would be a safer bet, or you could skip the fruit completely. We'll also need a couple of shallots. Cut off the root and the top. Cut each shallot in half. Peel off the dry skin, getting between the cloves if necessary, and cut the shallots pole to pole into half-inch strips. Place the squash and pear wedges on a large baking sheet and sprinkle with pepper, salt, and lots of olive oil, about 1/4 cup. Rub it all over to distribute salt and oil evenly. Here's one interesting fact to learn about baking sheets. They don't cook evenly. Outside cooks much faster than inside. We can use this to our advantage and place the sugar-loaded pears in the middle of the baking sheet to prevent them from burning. Place the baking sheet on the bottom rack of the oven. Check on your squash after 25 minutes. If it's starting to brown, flip it over. If not, keep going until you see signs of browning. Ovens vary, cookie sheets vary, and vegetables vary, so I can't give you the exact time. Now it's time to add the shallots and a few sage leaves if you have them. Sprinkle them with salt and coat in oil. Normally, the shallots would be sweated in some fat in a soup pot, to which you'd add your roasted squash and liquid. But I decided to forget the pot since we can cook them right in the baking sheet and then add the water to the blender. We want them to be translucent and tender, but not too brown, so they'll go in the middle of the baking sheet. Let's put the baking sheet back in the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes at 400 degrees. No convection fan this time to prevent shallots from burning. When your squash is soft and beautifully brown, and the shallots are translucent, you are done. It's normal and desirable for the sage leaves to get a bit crispy, and if the pear was riper, it would be more brown. Cool the vegetables slightly and dump into the blender. Add some boiling water to the baking sheet. Scrape up the brown bits and add to the blender. Cover the squash with warm water. Add half a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or acidic ingredient of your choice, salt, a grating of nutmeg, a tablespoon of maple syrup or brown sugar, and 1/4 cup of heavy cream. You're welcome to improvise with all these ingredients. With soups, nothing is set in stone, unless, of course, it's a stone soup. Start on low speed and gradually crank it up. Depending on the size of your blender, you might need to do this in batches. If your soup is looking a bit too thick, like mine is here, add more water. After the soup looks smooth, taste it for salt and acidity. If you're not sure what it needs, experiment on a small bowl. Make sure to puree this to death. If you have a Vitamix, it will take about 3 minutes, but most regular blenders will take longer. Now that we have our soup, let's make the garnish. Heat 1 tablespoon of butter in a skillet of a medium-high heat. When the butter is hot and foamy, add the pears and a tiny pinch of salt. Toss or stir to distribute the salt and then leave the pears alone to give them a chance to brown. Once you get browning, stir them again and repeat this process until the pears are tender and brown. Mine were really hard, so after I browned them, I added a splash of water to soften them a bit. Add some pine nuts or pumpkin seeds and mix to combine. Now all components are done and it's time to serve the soup. Top the soup with crème fraîche, then with the pear topping, and finally with soy reduction. I'll link to it below the video. Some people in my family, we won't name names, like to mix all this together. But that defeats this kind of plating. Keeping the garnishes on top allows you to make each spoon a little bit different. One might be creamier because of crème fraîche, and another smokier because of the soy reduction. Of course, if you skip all this fanciness, it's still a fabulous soup. Click here for more fun things to do with your veggies. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in my Orgasmic Vegetables class.